Okay, so you have your headpiece. I'm just working on one headphone right now, or one earpiece. And what I want to do is, I like to start off with this thing being one entire solid. So I make sure all the pieces are joined together. I'll start adding parting lines and those details, but I like to start off with it being a solid shape, or solid poly surface, because that will enable me to be able to use some of those Boolean commands and do some fun stuff there. So I'm going to start off by, I'm looking at my headset here, and there's a phone jack on the bottom that the wire plugs into. So I go ahead and make that. So do this. Go ahead and unhide here so you can see where I'm at. I can see where the bottom of the earpiece is. So I'm going to add a jack right here. That's where it's at on the piece. Yep. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to hide inverse like that. Can't see anything else. So as a reference, I'm going to just throw a point over here, so I know which side is what when I go to a different view here. Here we go. Right now I have this whole piece on an angle, so I'm going to go ahead and straighten this up for a second here. Find the center. I'm using a rotate command. There we go, center. See if I can lock onto a quad or something out here. There's a quad right there. I'll straighten it up. So now it's nice and straight. And I'm going to look at this angle right here, like so. On the bottom, we got this soft leather piece here. This is going to be hard plastic up on top, and this is where the hole is going to go. There's also a small parting line right up here. So I'm going to use a command called section. I'm going to just type in section, enter, while my object is highlighted. And it says, all right, where do you want to draw a section? So I'm going to click here, hold shift, and click over here. And what that did is it created a section line on my drawing, or on my part. It just created a line there, and that's all I want right now. This is representative of a parting line that's already in on the part I'm copying. That's a little bit too high, so I'm going to go ahead and do section again. Enter. I'm going to draw it down a little bit lower, right there. I'll start with that. Oops. So I've got this section, and all that does is it will just create it'll create a section of whatever part you're working on, which comes in really handy if you're doing some model making, or you're actually prototyping, or you have to hand this off to someone else and you want to give them an idea of what your cross sections look like. That's all it did, is it drew an actual circle here. Now, back to this view here. This is representative of that cross section, and then I have this hole for the jack, and I'm just going to use my calipers and take this measurement here. It's kind of an oval shape. 812 by 6.5. Call it 8 by 6.5. So there's an oval shape here. I'm just going to draw it. 6.5 wide, and it was 8 tall, something like that. Oops. 6.5 wide by 8 enter tall. There we go. I'm going to type in move, enter. I'm going to move this thing from the quad here to a quad here, and I'll look at my perspective view and see where that's at. It's over there. But I really want it over here next to this dot, this point I put in here that represents the bottom of the headphones. So there we go. Something like that. And now I'm just going to measure how deep this hole goes into the part. This will make more sense when I build it out. It goes in 8 millimeters. So I'm going to move this oval from a side view out here like so. I'm going to draw a line just as a reference about 8 millimeters deep, just from right here. 8, enter. There's a line right here. So I've got the oval shape right here on the side of my headphones. And I'm just going to basically do a solid extrude planar curve straight. I'm going to take it in to this 8 millimeter mark here. Make sure my object snaps are on. I have end on there, so it snaps to the end. So now I have this shape in here. I've got this as a solid, this is a solid, so that means I can use my Boolean commands. So I can take this earpiece now and subtract this shape. My shape is still there, but I can go ahead and delete it. Boom. And there's my headphone jack hole. And one thing I'm noticing is I did it too low. It actually has to be up a little bit. So, actually quite a bit. It doesn't go into the leather. So I've got this here. It's just a solid. I just hit undo a couple times. And I'm going to go to this view here. I'm just going to use my arrow key and tap it up until it's off the leather. And I'm just kind of eyeballing it here on my part. Actually, more like that. This is my 8 millimeter in mark. Something like that, I believe. Now, since I moved it, it's not quite long enough here, so I'm just going to use my transform by one-dimensional command. Transform at this end to this end and just grow it this way like that. I'll take this, I'll go ahead and Boolean difference that. Take that, delete it, I have my hole here. So this is from a side view, you know, you put your phone jack or your head jack right into there, the wire. And while I'm here, I can go ahead and add, there's some other details in there. For example, there's a small hole this probably, using my calipers, around 4 millimeters wide or diameter. I'm going to go ahead and draw that from this view here. It's a perfect circle, 4 millimeters, and I'm just going to do a solid extrude, planar curve straight, punch that in there like so. So I've got this solid is still a solid. I have this solid here, so I'm going to do the Boolean difference. Boolean difference. And then up in the command line or over on your the left bar there, it says delete input no. I'm just going to say yes, and it'll just go ahead and delete this when I do the Boolean difference. So I'm just left with the whole. So we got something that looks like that. Okay. Delete that for now. Whenever you're making headway on your model, remember to do incremental saves. Keep saving along in case you crash. So I've got this nice headphone jack in here now. And remember I had put this line here just as a reference earlier, the section view. I'll leave it there still. But now I'm going to go, actually I'm just going to draw a straight line across here, like so, from a side view. And this, I'm going to do a surface extrude, curve straight. And right now it's trying to extrude it up and down. I don't want to extrude it up and down. So I'm going to go to my top view here. I'm going to hit D for direction, enter, and I'm going to click here in space, hold shift, and click out here, and now it's telling it to extrude left to right, not up to down. And then I'm also going to tell it in my command line up on top here, both sides, yes. So it will extrude both ways at the same time. I'll just left click when it's out here, and so this is what I've done. I've created a surface going through my headphones, and it does intersect this piece here, which is fine. This is still a nice solid. It's completely airtight still, so I can still use my Boolean command. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to do a Boolean split. So I'm going to do Boolean split, this guy right here. Boom. And it says, all right, select your cutting surface. I'm going to select this as my cutting surface, hit enter. And now I can delete this cutting surface, but what it's done is it's created two solids now. It split this in half and it kept them as solids. So I've got two pieces here, and actually on the headphones themselves, this piece down here, this little detail around the edge of this larger solid is like a hard, shiny plastic, where this is more of a dull material up on top. So I'll be able to create that later in KeyShot. Now, I also have some more splitting to do. I actually want to treat this bottom piece. This is all leather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the solid extract tool. So I'm going to do solid extract surface. Solid extract surface, and I'm actually going to extract all of this. Hit enter. So I've extracted this whole piece. I've disconnected it from everything else. Let me go to a side view. I'll just bump this down so you can see that I've disconnected that from this piece up here. But in doing so, this was a solid because this was joined to this one and it made it airtight. But now you have two open shells. The top shell's open and the bottom shell's open. So what I'll do, since this is a planar flat surface right here, I can just select this, take this, join all that together. I can select this and do solid cap planar hole, and it just created a cap to this. So now the thing's airtight again. And I'm going to do the same for up here. I'm going to grab all this, join it together, make sure it's all tight. Oh, that's two separate parts. That's right. This is still solid. I'm just going to hide that for a second. But this one is not. It's just a poly shell or poly surface. So I'll take that, solid, cap planar hole, and it'll cap the bottom, which it did. So now that's a solid again. And the reason I wanted to make those solids, so now I can go in there and add fillets easily, versus just being an open shell. You can't add a fillet to an open shell or a radius on an edge. So I'm not quite ready. You know how I said I like to add fillets at the very end? I'm still going to do that. There's a couple more things I need to do here. This upper piece on this headphone, this is leather, and there's actually some stitching around this edge, and there's some stitching around this edge. It's really minimal on the headphones themselves. I'll do some stitching that is a lot more visible just for this demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a separate solid piece again. So I'm going to do that same process where I do a solid extract surface. I'm going to extract this surface here. And so that's extracted. I'm going to go ahead in a side view here and I'll bump this down so you can see what I'm doing. So this is an open shell now on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a loft. I'm going to do surface, loft. I can't do a cap planar hole because these aren't planar. They're not on the same level anymore. But I can do a loft where I loft this edge to this edge. Hit enter. Enter again. Hit OK. Now I have this surface here, which I can grab this piece now. Grab all this, join it together. And now this is a solid. And I'm going to do the same up here. This is just a shell. So I'm going to loft this edge to this edge. Do a surface, loft this edge to this edge. Enter, enter. Hit OK. Take all this and join it together, like so. So now it's solid. That's a solid. I think for this piece, you can go ahead and start adding fillets. But before I do, I'm going to do one last. I'm going to do an incremental save with no fillets. So I have a copy of this with, if I ever have to go back, I can. Alright, so I'm going to take this, take it to there. Actually, I'll leave all these separate so we can see what I'm doing here. So here's show you how we broke these parts out. And now do a little bit of I'm going to do some fillets here. So I'm going to do solid fillet edge. And I'm going to select this edge. Enter. And I've got a little preview of how big a fillet it's going to make. And if I let it make a fillet that big, it's just going to take away too much material. You'll notice when I do this, it takes it way back. And if I take this back to my headphone piece, it's going to look pretty funny. It doesn't look like they line up anymore, right? So, undo that. Do a solid. Fillet edge. Select this edge again. Enter. But I'm not going to do one. I'm going to drag this down and just do a small fillet. Just enough to break the corner. See how this looks. So it's 0.13. I'll do the same down here. I'm going to do solid fillet edge. I'm going to just type in 0.13 to match what I just did with the other one. Looks pretty small. I don't know if that's going to be noticeable or not. Yeah, I got a little parting line there. It just makes the piece look so much better when you add these little details, these little parting lines. What I'll do this. Because this parting line looks too small in comparison to what I'm really trying to model here, I'm going to go back. I'm going to fudge this a little bit. I'm going to do a solid, fillet edge, fillet this guy, boom. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Let's say it was 1/2 mil. So I just did that at 1/2 mil. And I'll do the same thing down here. I'm going to do solid, fillet edge, fillet this, drag this out to about 0.5 or so. So it's a little bit softer edge. It looks a little bit more like it would be. Boy, that doesn't even look. Yeah, we'll run with it. Yeah, let's make it a little bit bigger. Really want to make this look soft, like it's really a soft good. So I did 1.1. That's a little bit more realistic. Now I'll take this, and you'll see that I've got kind of a mismatch. Not quite lined up. So I'm just going to take this piece. I'll do the same thing on the inside. I'm going to, while I'm here, I'm going to fillet the inside. There we go. Solid, fillet edge, 0.13. Is that it? No, that was too small. So I forgot what radius I had on this outside edge, but I'll just use my analyze. Diameter or radius. I can click on any one of these edges here. It'll tell me I was at 0.5. Alright, there we go. So I'll do a solid, fillet edge, type in 0.5, enter, select my edge, hit enter again, enter. Now we got 0.5 edge on there. But when I take it up to my actual part that it needs to mate up to, I can see from the side profile that it's just a little bit too shy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my 3D transform button. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. So I'm going to hit 3D button. I'm going to lock to the center of the part, just somewhere in here, hoping. Go to the side view here. I'm going to click and I'm going to basically grow the part a little bit like so. Just a little bit. And I'll tap it back down into place like that. So now it lines up a little bit better on this edge where this was in a little bit too far before. So the outside edge is looking pretty good. A nice soft fillet there. It looks like it's could be leather. And I've got to add a fillet on this inside piece yet. I still have this hard edge. So I'm going to do a solid fillet edge. I'm going to snag this, hit enter. I'm actually going to grow this out to somewhere in there, hit enter. So we get that happening. Now what I don't like, and what I'd probably go back and try to fix, is lining up these edges, and because I transformed this larger, these edges on the inside don't quite match up the way I would like. I could go in, let me try this. If you ever need to tweak an overall shape of an object, there's a very important tool called Cage Edit. So I'm going to select this piece, and I'm going to type in Cage Edit. Cage Edit, boom. I'm going to select Bounding Box as one of my options. C-plane is the next option. 4.4.4 point. Yep. Matter of fact, yeah. I'll hit enter, enter. And when you do that, you have all these control points now. And what you can do is you can grab these control points, and when you move a control point like so, you move your shape like that. So you can kind of sculpt your parts as you go. I did this in hopes that maybe I could grab just the center pieces here, like this one and this one, tap those in. I did 3 spaces, 4 spaces there. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So I'm able to move in that center wall. I'll let you look over here of that top piece to match. Oops. Something like that. So I was able to turn on Cage Edit on this top piece, move the control points just on the center to get this wall to match up better with this wall. Which it looks like it does. So notice that this actually isn't the same. There we go. This one can come in one more. There we go. So that's Cage Edit. Pretty sweet. If you ever had to do something really dramatic, I mean, it just gives you an idea of what you can do to your parts and shapes and all that good stuff. Boom. And I right click on my control points over here to turn everything off. Now the cage is still there that it created, and if you're going to use it later, you can just hide it, save it. I'm just going to delete it. I don't need it anymore. So now we've got this. So let's add a bit of stitching. Matter of fact, let me just look at a side view here real quick. Looks pretty decent. I'm going to do the Cage Edit one more time. So I'm going to type in Cage Edit, Bounding Box, C-plane, 4 points is fine. If you want to have a lot more control over your part, you can add a lot more control points right here. So I would, instead of 4, 4, and 4, you could change this to 8, 8, and 8. And you'll have twice as many control points to pull on. I try to start as minimal as possible before adding a ton of control points because it'll just get pretty messy. But anyway, 4, 4, and 4 looks good. Degrees, all 3 is good. Hit enter one more time. There's my cage. Then hit enter one more time, and there's my control points, and they're turned on for me. So I did that because I want to just bump this out. And you can see from the side view, I just want to bump this out a little bit more. One, two. 1, 2. Bump these out. 1, 2, and bump these out. 1, 2. And that is too far. Now I have this lip that's way over the side. Bump that back. Let me bump this one back 1 millimeter. That one back 1 mil. There we go. That one back 1 mil. Still a little too much. That one looks alright. So what am I missing here? Is that right? It was back where I started, but 1, 2. We'll go with that. Just one more thing here. Go ahead and do grow this thing in 3D one more time. Maybe like that. Tap it back down here like so. Alright, so let's add some stitching here. What I'm going to do is I'll sink this top cushion piece. Looks like it's intersecting, yeah. So these two parts are intersecting a bit, which is fine because now I can do a dimension, curve. From objects intersection. Okay, so I'm going to use curve from object intersection. Select object number 1, select object number 2, hit enter, and it should draw a curve where they intersect around this edge, I'm hoping. If not, we'll just make a curve. So it made 2 curves, one where it intersects on the inside, one on the outside. I'm just going to tap these over to the side so you can see what these look like this. Which is good. What I'm going to do is redraw a new oval over that, something a little bit more perfect here. Let me see if I got a center point. I'm trying to lock to a center point on this. There's no center point, so I'm just going to draw a line. Maybe there's a midpoint here. There's midpoint there, midpoint there. Now I have a midpoint here, which would be my center for the whole thing. So I'm just going to draw a new oval from this to that to that. There we go. So I could tap this over here. So basically, I just made a rail. I'm basically going to array some stitching along this. So now I need a stitch. I'm just going to draw one stitch and basically array it along this rail, and it'll look like someone went in with a sewing machine and put a stitch around this whole deal. So let me do that. Turn this upside down here. Oh, this is on an angle too. Huh. That's not good. In 1 second, I'm going to draw another oval. I'm going to make sure I have planar on. And I'm just going to go ahead and use project here. Draw this from there to the midpoint to quad. So that oval I drew earlier, because I didn't know it, I was drawing it kind of skewed, so I just redrew it flat up here. And how I drew it flat, when you have project on in your object snaps, the project option, whatever you draw, it'll always project it right down to the C-plane. So it'll always be flat, whatever you're drawing. So I selected that, and now I have this oval. It's completely flat. I can tap it back over here and just kind of physically move it where I need to on my part, which was down here, but I won't do that yet. I'm going to still leave it on the C-plane here. I'm going to do a hide inverse right now so you can see what I'm doing. So now I'm just going to draw a small curve. Let's do this. I'll draw a little circle. It's going to take some finessing, but I draw something like this. I'm just going to move this out just beyond this, like so. And I'm going to take this circle that I just made, and I'm going to do a solid pipe. Solid pipe command right here, and that I'm going to type in 0.1, enter. That's too small. 0.5, enter. That's too small for a stitch. Let me type in 1. Too big for a stitch. 0.5. Alright, still too big. Let's do 0.3. We'll start with that. So basically, I drew this little donut shape, and I have it laying on this track. Okay, I'll take this donut shape. I don't need the whole thing. What I can do, I could just split it back here like so. Use this and just trim all this away. Have this. Now I'll take this shape, this surface. I'm going to do a transform array along curve. So transform array along curve says, alright, select path curve. I'm going to select this oval that we drew. And it says, alright, number of items, or do you want to put a certain distance between the items? So I could tell it, hey, I want 100 of these little half donuts to spread around this path. Or I can tell them, you know what, I want just a millimeter in between each one. I'll hit OK. You can see what that looks like. I did just a millimeter, and it's, let me shade this, and it created this pattern all the way around this thing. It's not what I want, so I definitely need larger than a millimeter. So I'm going to grab this donut shape. I'm going to repeat the command, transform array along curve, select path, select that as a path, and I'm going to put in 3 millimeters as my distance. That's looking a little bit more potentially like a stitch pattern. And so now when I take this, I'll just grab the whole thing right now. I'm going to group it, Control G, unhide. I'll take the stitching, and I'll go ahead and I'm just going to tap it down here, align it up in here, kind of tuck it in this parting line. And you can see when I shade this now, kind of looks like stitching in here. Now this is pretty heavy stitching. I'm probably going to minimize this even more. I'll go back to the drawing board, but it's a start. And so if you're doing any other type of soft goods, shoes, leather goods, those types of things where you have some really robust exposed stitching, this is a pretty good way of getting that. Now this could have been, if I wanted to do a really funky pattern of the stitch, make it look like I'm joining two parts together. It all depends on that curve that you flow on. So if you do a section view of whatever part you're working on, you can flow that with a this half donut shape and make it look like a stitch is sticking out of that material. And then it looks even more realistic as soon as you run it down between a parting line. That's ultimately what you want it to look like. I'm going to go back and I'm going to make this a lot more subtle. When I'm looking at these headphones, I just see, you can't even see the stitching really. It's more of a different type thing happening, but I'm going to make this super minimal. I could even probably grab the stitching as it is right now and use my transform button. Go to a side view here, and I'm just going to squeeze it in here like so. Tap it down here. I'll go back. Now I've just shrunk the stitching all together, and I'm really sinking it back into that parting line. And I really don't even want to see this much of the stitch. I just want to see about half of this much sticking through there. So I'm going to go back. Since I've grouped all that together, I can just select one piece of it and I'll select it all. I'll do a transform 3D again. I'll lock to the center of one of these things here. Do something. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller yet, like so. Pull it down to on center with that gap. Let me go to this view and see what it looks like now. Now it's getting even a lot more minimal. I'm liking that right there. It's not too much. You really can't see the stitching when you're looking at this view, which is fine. But if I'm doing some type of rendering where I've got close up at this angle, it'll just add that touch of realism when I do that. Just having this little bit of stitch coming through. Now the key is you have to repeat that same stitch pattern on the inside in here, which I'll go ahead and do. I'll repeat the same process here. Go ahead and grab this stitch pattern like so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a curve from object. So let's do this. Curve from object, duplicate edge. And that's great because if I have an edge to a surface, I can click that edge like that. Click the other edge over here like that. Hit enter, and it just created a curve right on that edge that I can use. I'm going to grab my stitching over here. I'm going to hide inverse, hide everything else. So now this is, oops, I have this stitch pattern which has been transformed to a different size to something I like. I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift Control G and ungroup it all. I'm going to grab one of these stitches, hit Control Copy, Paste. I'm going to tap it out of the group here real quick, like so. And while this is all still ungrouped, I'm just going to go ahead and grab it all like this, hit Control and unselect these, and hit Control G again. Because I want these grouped, I don't want to have to mess with all those little separate items. Now I'll take this piece and I'm going to mirror it over because the stitches are going that way on the inside. And I might even straighten this thing out, so I'm going to use my rotate command here. I'll rotate it from this quad to straight up and down like so. And I'm going to hit move, enter. I'll move it from here to somewhere in here. I'll go near, like so. Let's poke it out a little bit like this. Now I'll do that same command. So looking at 3D, where are we? We've got this out here. We got this line in here. I gotta join these. It's all one continuous line. Now, well, I notice that this line's a little bit higher, so I'm going to go ahead and move this while I'm here. I'm just going to tap it down with my key. Alright. going to select the object, transform, array, along curve. I'll select this curve. It says, alright, distance between items. I used 3 last time to get this effect. Let's see how it looks here. Yeah, about the same spacing. I'm okay with that. Now I've got a double stitch here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete one of these. I'll go ahead and grab all this. I'm going to hit Control G and group it together. I'll unhide. Now it's really sticking out like that, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these here. I'm going to hide inverse. And I may just grab this stitching, and I'm going to use my 3D transform button. Right? Actually, I'll just use 2D maybe. 2D. Boom. Try to find the center here of something. There we go. I'll transform this out a little bit like so. Go back to here. Let's take a look now. You can barely see it, so I transformed it a little bit too much out of view. I hit Control Z to undo. Now go ahead and do the transform button again. Make sure center is the only object snap on, so it will turn project off. Make sure it will snap to the center somewhere. Oh, take that. Maybe I can just zoom in and watch this as I transform it. There we go. Let's try that much. There we go. I think that's just enough that if I was doing some detail shot renderings, I wouldn't want much more stitching than that showing through. It's not overkill. Now it all depends on the type of stitching you're doing too. I mean, you could do some fun patterns and actually replicate a lot of different type of official stitch patterns out there and run them on the surface the way you'd want to. I'm going to do an unhide here so we can see the stitches on the outside and stitches on the inside. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now I've got this piece and this piece I want to take care of. So I'm going to do a hide inverse. I'm going to go ahead and stop and save this video so far so I can just do a part 2 so they're not so large of files.